Yeah, you guys sound awesome. It's great to sit in the front row because I hear all of you singing. Hope you had a great day, the train and Santa Cruz and all of that. When my wife and I lived in the Bay Area, we would always go to Santa Cruz. It's just like one of my favorite places. I just think it's a great beach and it's super fun. So I hope you had a great time and are ready to hear God's word. There's a supposedly true story from the early 1900s, a news item about a train waiting to cross a drawbridge. And back then, there'd be a watchman, and he would swing a lantern to indicate that the drawbridge was up and that it was not safe to cross. But if the train conductor didn't see a lantern, he knew that the bridge was down and he could keep going. So the train didn't see a lantern, crossed, and fell into the water. And fortunately, no one was hurt, but a lot of goods got damaged. So some people that owned the goods, they sued the bridge company for this accident because there was no warning telling the guy that the bridge was up. And at the trial, the watchman that night was called as a witness, and the lawyer just grilled him. Were you the watchman on the night of the accident? And he said, yeah. And the lawyer said, were you drunk? And the watchman said, no. And the lawyer said, well, did you wave your lantern to warn the train that the bridge was up? And the watchman said, yes. And his testimony helped the bridge company win the lawsuit. Well, afterwards, one of his friends asked him and said, man, that lawyer was really tough on you. Did all those questions make you nervous? And the watchman said, oh, yeah. I was afraid he was going to ask if the lantern was lit. The lawyer did not ask the right question. And I think that what that shows is that sometimes the right question can be even more important than getting the answer. It's like Isaac Newton deducing the law of gravity. He watches an apple fall out of a tree, and from that he deduces the law of gravity. Apples had been falling out of trees forever. It was the genius of Isaac Newton to ask the question, why? And that led him to the theory of gravity. And I think that's one of the reasons I chose to organize these 4 evening talks this week around the questions around this statement, God alone is our only hope. The who, the what, the how, and the when of placing our hope only in God. And on Monday night, we talked about who God is, that makes him worthy of our hope. Last night, talked about what God is doing and how when we join him in his rescue mission to this world, we find hope in that because we see that he is redeeming this world. And so tonight, I want to talk about how. Specifically, how long do we have to wait for God's hope to arrive? So Jesus, as we start to look at your word, ask that you'd use the words that I say, the things that we're going to think in these next few minutes, to help us know you better and ground our hope even more firmly in only you. Pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen. One of the refrains you hear throughout the Bible is, how long, O Lord? It shows up over and over. How long, O Lord? And I'm guessing everyone here is at some point has asked that question or is asking that question. How long until I find someone to marry? How long till this health crisis gets better? How long until this marriage heals? How long till there's reconciliation in my estranged family? How long until my adult children return to their faith? How long till I find a new job? How long is this talk going to last tonight because I'm tired from going to Santa Cruz? How long, O Lord, do I have to wait? Now, I think it needs to be said just at the outset here that sometimes God moves very quickly and we don't have to wait. It's not like everything is we have to wait for it. God sometimes moves very quickly, but other times we do have to wait. And there's a lot of waiting in the Bible. Abraham waits 25 years for the son that God promised him. The Israelites take 40 years wandering in the wilderness to get to the promised land. Over and over, we see waiting in the Bible. But what we also see in the Bible is that waiting has been too good for too long for too many people to be all bad. And if we wait with Jesus, our waiting produces power, courage, and hope. Our waiting can actually produce power, courage, and hope if we do it with Jesus. And that's very counterculture because we are an impatient culture, aren't we? Right? Like we have same-day delivery, we eat fast food, we have email, we have text, we just want everything to go quickly. I love speed. I like to drive fast. I walk fast. I talk fast, in case you haven't noticed. But like fine wine aging, some of the best things in life actually just take time, and we just have to wait on them. But here's the thing. Biblical waiting is not passive. Biblical waiting is not passive. Again, if we wait with Jesus, then it gives us power, hope, courage, and joy. We see this in the prophet Habakkuk in the Old Testament. He lives at a time of crisis in Israel, lots of injustice, people are suffering, and the very first line of his book says this: "How long, O Lord, shall I cry for help, and you will not listen? If you alone are my only hope, God, just how long do I have to wait before I see your hope in my life? You seem to be taking your time." And then God, I'm not going to read it, but then God actually answers Habakkuk. He says, well, Habakkuk, since you ask, I'm actually about to do something. The Babylonians are going to conquer you, and they're going to take you all into exile, into Babylon for 70 years. And Habakkuk is like, FYI, Lord, that's a bad thing. That's not a good thing. Now, God goes on to say that the exile is going to strengthen Israel, which it does, but in the meantime, they're going to have to wait 70 years in exile in Babylon to go back to Jerusalem. So Habakkuk hears this, and then he says this: "I will stand at my watch and station myself on the ramparts. I will look to see what he will say to me, for the revelation awaits an appointed time. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come." And this passage tells us 6 ways that we can wait with Jesus. When we are asking the question, how long? 6 ways to wait with Jesus that can give us courage, hope, and power. And I'm going to use the question. I'm going to stick with the question theme. These talks are oriented around questions. I'm going to stick with the question theme that I've been using for these 4 talks, the evening talks, the who, the what, the how, and the when of God being our only hope. And I'm going to add 2 more, where and why, to address this question of how do we wait well? When we are asking the question, how long till we see your hope? How do we do this with Jesus? And I want to start with the word what. Because when we're waiting, the word we focus on out of those 6 words is what. What we're waiting for. We're focused on what we're waiting for. Marriage, the job, the health crisis to go away, the finances to get better. We focus on what we're waiting for, and that's normal. We all do it. But it also can be disempowering. It can also be frustrating. It also can be discouraging if we're not getting the what of what we're waiting for. Instead, biblical waiting focuses on those other 5 words that I just mentioned. And focusing on these 5 words is how we wait with Jesus in a way that produces hope. First, more important than what we wait for is who we wait on. And I talked about this on Monday night. I'm not going to go into depth, but Habakkuk says, "I will look to see what he will say to me." What's he looking at? The thing, is he looking at what he's waiting? No, he's looking at God. His focus is on God. He's not waiting on what he wants to get from God. He's waiting on God himself. And it is okay for us to go to prayer and ask God for the things that we desire. He invites us to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. We just don't want to get stuck there. Because when we can move into a more mature place of faith and move past wanting what God can give us and instead just wanting God, period, all those other things start to matter less. Because the presence of God is more fulfilling. And experiencing the presence of God does give us hope and courage. And I'm going to give you an example later on in this talk. More important than what we wait for is who we wait on. Second, more important than what we wait for is why we wait. Because with Jesus, waiting is never pointless. There is always purpose. When we are waiting with Jesus, there's purpose in it. In the Bible, after the Israelites get out of slavery in Egypt, it doesn't take them very long to get to the promised land. But then they get there and they're afraid to go in because they see everyone in there looks like giants. They're afraid that God's not going to help them, not going to deliver them. And so God says, you're not ready to go into the promised land. Your faith is too weak right now. You have a disempowered victim mentality. So he makes them wander in the desert for 40 years so they can develop a stronger faith in him. Which shows, by the way, parenthetically, sometimes our waiting is self-imposed. Sometimes God's willing to move quicker, but we're the ones that are dragging our feet. We're the ones that aren't ready for it. We're the ones that are holding back. Sometimes our waiting is self-imposed. But even still, God used the waiting. It wasn't pointless. Because here's what happened in those 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. They developed a legal system. They developed an army. They developed a rough government structure. All things you don't need when you're slaves in Egypt, but things you're going to need if you're going to be a nation. The waiting wasn't wasted. God developed in them, while they wandered, the things that they were going to need for their promised future. It took God just a few weeks to get them out of Egypt, but it took him 40 years to get Egypt out of them. But it was not wasted. Our waiting with Jesus is never wasted. There's purpose in it. When I was in high school, I had the worst PE teacher ever. He was also the varsity basketball coach, and so the only thing we did all year in PE was play basketball. That's all we did. And he would only allow the guys on his varsity basketball team to participate in PE basketball. Okay, it's PE. It's supposed to be for everyone, but he used it as just like an extra practice for his varsity basketball team. And that's when I discovered that the coach had favorites based on purely arbitrary reasons. Like his favorites were the guys that could run and jump and dunk and all of that, right? Those were his favorites. Meanwhile, people like me had to sit on the bench and develop character and become pastors. But I got impatient waiting on the bench, watching the varsity team play, so I went into the weight room. And I just went, every day I'd go into the weight room and I started lifting weights and I kind of started to put on some muscle and all that, which was kind of cool. My point is this, when you are in the weight room, W-A-I-T, weight room, not necessarily W-E-I-G-H-T, but when you are in a weight room, a waiting room, and you think nothing is happening, God is developing something in you. You're putting on spiritual muscle. He's making you stronger. He's making you more like Jesus. If you are waiting with Jesus, you're putting on muscle, spiritual muscle. You're getting closer to him because you're praying more. Or maybe he is changing your desires. Like I talked about in my case on Monday night, how God had to change my desires from being a professor to being a pastor, which was a way better deal for me. Not what I started out wanting, but as I waited, God kind of changed what my heart wanted. So maybe he's doing that, changing your desires. That's why you're waiting. Maybe he is developing skills in you that you're going to need for whatever future he has in store for you. And you don't yet know what that future is, but he knows the skills you're going to need, and he's developing that in you as you wait. Maybe you're not ready for that new job that you're waiting for, and he's making you ready. And if you got it now, you'd mess it up because you're not ready for it. The same way the Israelites weren't yet ready for the promised land. When it seems like nothing is changing in the weight room, remember, if you're waiting with Jesus, you're changing. You're growing. You're putting on spiritual muscle. And at the end of the day, you'll end up thanking God that he didn't give it to you right away. You'll say, God, if you had given me that spouse, then I'd have messed it up because my character wasn't ready for it yet. Man, if you had given me that job, it wouldn't have worked out because I didn't have the skills I would have needed for that. God, if you had given me that thing, if you had made me a professor like I asked you all those years, I'd have missed out on the bigger life you had for me. For me personally, thank you so much that you didn't give me what I wanted and you made me wait. And as I waited, you changed my heart. God will come through. Maybe not in the ways we expect. Often it's even better. God's answer is often yes or better. So when you're waiting, here's the question we need to ask. And this is a question I hate to wait. I am impatient, but I've learned to pray this question when I'm waiting on God for something. Jesus, show me how you're developing me so I can participate with you. Show me how you're developing me so I can participate with you. Because when I see what he's doing as I'm waiting, that gives me hope. It doesn't feel pointless, aimless, purposelessness. And so when I can see the ways he's developing me, I can participate in it, and it gives me hope because I see the purpose. More important than what we wait on is why we wait. It's to help us grow. Third, am I done? Is that the sign? Is that like at the Oscars when they play you off? Okay. Because I got 3 more points. Third, more important than what we wait for is how we wait. Namely, expectantly. Habakkuk says this, I will station myself on the ramparts. So ramparts are towers where watchmen stood to look out at the distance, especially to see if there was an enemy army coming. So this is a reference to watchmen in the towers looking. He says, I'll station myself on the ramparts. He uses the same language here that's used in Psalm 130, the same imagery of watchmen looking and waiting. Psalm 130 says this, I wait for the Lord more than watchmen wait for the morning. How do watchmen wait for the morning? Do you think watchmen are like, yeah, I don't know. Do you think morning's going to come this time or not? Like this might be the day morning doesn't come. No, they know morning's going to come. They wait expecting. They wait with anticipation because they know morning's going to come. When we wait expectantly. God's going to move. God's going to do something. Maybe not the thing we think he's going to do. Maybe not the thing we currently want him to do, but he's going to do something, and it's going to be good. And so remind ourselves, no, God always comes through. He's never late. He always comes through just at the right time. And I know that right now, in this room, I know that there may be some of you that are waiting on some really painful things. I know that you may be waiting for a not yet that feels like a not ever. I know that you may be waiting for something that you think, why would I have to wait for this? It seems like such a good thing. But even in those awful situations, if we turn to God and can experience his presence, it does bring courage and hope. And I'm going to give you an example in a minute. Who, why, how. Next, more important than what we wait for is when we wait. And here's what I mean. When we wait, we're often trying to live in the future, right? When this thing happens, I'll be happy. When that thing happens, I'll have what I want. When in the future, right? When I get married, then my life will begin. I remember when I was a college ministries pastor, one of my students got engaged, and they had an engagement party for them. And at his engagement party, he said, I'm finally engaged. Now all my problems are over. And all the married people in the room are like, are you going to tell him? Do you want me? Someone's got to tell this poor guy. Right? When I get my job, then I'll be successful. When my kids leave the house, then they come back. Trust me. All 3 of my kids have graduated. 2 of them have come back, right? The nest is filling back up again. When? But here's the thing. We don't wait in the future. We wait in the now. And there are blessings in the now. And if we're focused on the when, we're going to miss the blessings in the now. And part of waiting with Jesus is to ask him, show me the good things in the now so I don't miss them. I have a friend, he's 39, and he's been single way longer than he wants to be single. And that's painful. And waiting on a spouse and a family and all that, it's been very painful for him. But I remember one time years ago when I was kind of in the thick of raising my 3 kids and doing my job and going to games and swim meets and my job and all of this stuff, and it just felt like my entire life was have to and no get tos. I mean, it was all good stuff, but it was just lots of obligations and all this stuff. And one sunny summer afternoon, I was walking down one of the streets in our city, and on this sunny day, and there was my single friend sitting at an outdoor table with a cool, frosty drink in his hand and a plate of oysters, reading a book by himself. And I was like, what would that be like? And I said to him, I know you want to be married and have a family, and that's a good thing, and I'm glad I have a family and all of that. But I just need to say, at the stage of life that I'm in right now, everything in me wants to be you in this moment, at least for an hour or 2. The freedom you have that I don't have in your singleness, to sit here, sip a cold drink, read a book. And I know waiting for a family is painful, but you got some advantages that I don't have right now. There's good things in the now. And for that matter, when I look back on those busy years, I miss them. And I wish that I'd savored them more. Whenever younger dads ask me, what's your advice to me? It's always the first thing I say, savor it more. Savor it more. I wish I'd done that more. Too often, I was just getting through it, just moving from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. I wish I'd just paused and just said to myself, this is good, and it won't last forever. I did that some. It's not like I never did it. I did it some, but I just wish I'd done way more of it. Stop trying to get to some future goal, because that can make us miss the good things God's given us in the now. A few years ago, when my oldest daughter was in college, she said to me one day, she said, just think, Dad, there was a time when you picked me up for the last time, and neither of us knew it was the last time. Oh, put a knife in my heart, why don't you? And so then I said, well, I could pick you up now. And she said, no, that'd be weird. I wish I'd savored it more, knowing that it wouldn't last forever. Don't be so future-focused that you miss the good things in the now. Who, why, how, when, and then finally, where. More important than what we wait for is where we wait. And this is similar to the point I just made. Where we wait, which is right where we are. And here's what I mean. Often when we're waiting not just to get to a future state, but we're also waiting to get somewhere else than where we are. To the new job, to the new health situation, to the new finances or whatever it is. But here's the thing. Jesus has yet to bless anyone except where they are already. Right where they are already. Jesus has yet to bless anybody except right where they are already. Habakkuk tells the Israelites that they're going to be conquered by the Babylonians and taken into exile in Babylon for 70 years, and that did happen. And when they got there were a bunch of false prophets that kept saying to the Israelites, don't worry, this is temporary, we're going to go back home real soon. All the false prophets were saying, we're going to go back to Jerusalem any day now. However, Jeremiah the prophet, the true prophet of God, said, they're lying to you. No, that's not what's going to happen. And in Jeremiah 29, he kind of gives this speech, this letter to the exiles in Babylon. And Jeremiah 29 contains the really familiar verse to a lot of us. I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a future and a hope. If you've been around churches, you've heard it a lot. You see it on little memes on social media. You see it on bumper stickers and toothbrushes and all of that stuff, right? I mean, it's a good verse. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's a good verse. Do you know the context? Do you know the context? Never read a text without the context. Because the context changes what those words mean. Here's the context. Jeremiah says this to the exiles. This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all of those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Here's my message to you, says God. Build houses, settle down, plant gardens, and eat what they produce. Marry and have sons and daughters. Seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I have carried you into exile. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you, the ones saying you're going to go back to Jerusalem any day now. They are prophesying lies to you in my name. This is what the Lord says. When 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my good promise to bring you back to this place. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all of your heart. Shifts the meaning a bit, doesn't it? I know the plans I have for you, and they're not your plans, but they're still good plans. I know the plans I have for you, and they're not your plans, but they're still good plans. You're in Babylon for 70 years. Most of you, vast majority of you, are never going to see Jerusalem again. Your eyes will never see Jerusalem again. But seek the peace and the prosperity of the city to where I have sent you, because when it prospers, you will prosper. I am going to bless you. Where? Back in Jerusalem where they want to go? I am going to bless you right here in Babylon, which he did. All throughout Israel's history, They had constantly turned to false gods. That was the main problem. Over and over, Baal, other false gods. They kept turning to false gods. But it was in Babylon that they discovered that God wasn't just some local deity confined to the temple in Jerusalem. What they discovered in Babylon was, oh no, he is the one and only God, and he is everywhere, which was a much bigger God than they had when they just confined him to the temple in Jerusalem. And that's what Jeremiah means. After 70 years, you're going to understand God is the only God there is. And then he says, then you will call on me, and I will answer you, because then you're going to understand who I really am. I am the one universal God. And sure enough, when they returned after 70 years to Jerusalem, they never again worshiped those false gods like Baal. He blessed them in the place they didn't think that they could be blessed. Is there a that place for you that you think you can't be blessed in? That place of failure or frustration or pain, that place of disappointed hopes and dashed dreams, that loneliness that won't quit, that career that isn't quite what you hoped for, that place where the cancer won't heal, the marriage won't mend, the kids won't mind, that place where God seems silent, that's the place I'm talking about. Do you have a that place? Because surely the Lord is in that place, though you may be unaware, and it is in that place that God is going to bless you. It doesn't mean you're never going to get to some other place. He'll get you back to Jerusalem when it's the appropriate time, but he can bless you right there in that place where you don't think there can be a blessing. So let me give you an example. Years ago, my sister married a great guy who had custody of his 4-year-old son from his first marriage. His first wife had abandoned him, and he had custody of their 4-year-old son when my sister married him. Well, about the same time, this little boy's mother started living with her new boyfriend, who was a child molester, and he molested this little 4-year-old boy during one of his visits to his mom. And this all came out because he confessed it to his therapist. So my sister and her husband wanted to put restrictions in place to make sure that the little boy would never be around the mom's boyfriend when he went to visit the mom. Seems reasonable, right? He'd molested this little 4-year-old boy, and all my sister and her husband were saying was, when he goes to visit, they weren't saying he can never visit his mom again, just when he goes to visit, can this guy not be there? It just makes sense. The mom didn't think it made sense. The mom fought them at every turn. She dragged them into court, said, he's my live-in boyfriend. He has a right to be here. And the mom just fought this, didn't want any restrictions placed on the visitation. And then they'd reach an agreement on how to handle it, but then the mom would just back out, right? Variations of agreements to keep the boyfriend away when the little boy was visiting his mom, but then the mom would back out. This went on for 5 years. And then even after the final settlement, after 5 years of going to court and spending a lot of money, and then even after the final settlement, which did say the boyfriend could not be there when the boy visited his mom, when the boy would visit his mom, she'd lie to him and tell him all kinds of lies about my sister and make up stories about what a terrible person my sister was. And this little boy would then come home mad at my sister, and there'd be a couple of days after he visited his mom where he would just say terrible things to her and just was terrible to my sister. But my sister refused to speak ill of the mother, at least to the little boy. To me, there was ill spoken of the mother. But, I mean, you got to vent somewhere, right? So there was plenty of ill spoken to me about the mother, but never to the little boy. She would never speak ill of his mother to him. All of that went on for 14 years, where my sister and her husband loved with a stubborn love that they weren't going to let go of this, and that they're always taking the high road, sometimes asking, how long, O Lord? How long, O Lord, is this going to last? And my sister says, for a time, I was frustrated because God seemed absent and silent. Like, where was he? Why is he not helping? We just want what's right for this boy. And she said, I just couldn't see but he was there. I just couldn't see what he was doing at the time because he was everywhere. And as time went on, she started to see where he was. She says, he didn't want any of this to happen, and he was with us, suffering with us, but more than that, he was providing for us. My sister said there was one day that she and her husband were in church, and they just cried all the way through church. And she said, but that was the day that we finally fully gave it to the Lord. finally turned it over to God and said, this is too big for us. We give it fully to you. And that day, she said, things started to change. God came through. My sister said the fact that it took so long to get that final settlement actually turned out to be a good thing, because all that legal wrangling forced study after study after study that revealed new aspects of this boyfriend's behavior, that when the final settlement was reached, it was far more restrictive final settlement than my sister and her husband were asking for. So my sister says God wasn't silent. He didn't let those early agreements happen because they were too lenient. He wanted to protect us even more than we wanted to protect ourselves. And she said once we turned it over to God, we started to discover his strength with us every day. Like that sense of his presence, we could just feel it with us. We knew he was there, and that gave us hope, and that gave us courage to go through this long 14-year-long ordeal, because we could feel him with us. And it just kind of charged our souls. It made us stronger. And she says, he led us on a convoluted path, but his plan was better. We just couldn't see it at the time. And now that little boy's grown up. He's an adult. He's married. He doesn't remember being molested because he was too young, but he does know about it. Because by the terms of the final settlement, when he turned 18, the settlement said he had to be told the entire story when he turned 18. And he was. He was told the whole story by a therapist. My sister and her husband were there. This boy was there. His mom was there as this therapist read out the entire file of everything that had happened to him. And when he heard the whole story, he turned to my sister and he said, I want you to know. I want you to know, I know I was terrible to you. I know when I would go to visit her, she would poison my mind against you, and I remember coming home and saying terrible things to you. But I want you to know, even then, when I was being terrible to you, I knew who really loved me. She didn't love me. You loved me, even when it was hard. She's not my mother. You are. And my sister said, thank you. And I love you the same as the other 3 kids I had myself. And there's no difference in how much I love you, but ultimately, I am not your mom. I'm your stepmom. And you don't have to do it today. You maybe don't even have to do it this year, but at some point, you're going to have to forgive her so that you don't end up being eaten alive by anger and bitterness. My sister and her husband had 3 more kids, super close family, lots of love, lots of joy. But my sister, if she were telling this story, and I have her permission, if she were telling this story, what she would say is the best thing that came out of it was what it did for my sister. Because she would say, in my 20s, you never would have guessed when I was in my 20s I ever could have gone through anything this difficult. Because I was shallow, I was a party girl, I just wanted to have fun, I was pretty self-centered. And as her older brother, I can verify the truth of that statement. And she said, but this changed me. This made me stronger. This grew me up. She said, it forced me to get less selfish. It forced me to get stronger. And the best thing is, it forced me to go back to Jesus because I'd been away from him for way too long. And she says, I've come to see that when God seems silent, he's actually leading me to something better than my own plans. And when I look at this boy and the depth of love I have for him, this child I did not give birth to, but that my heart cannot distinguish from my other 3, it's amazing how Jesus turned all that pain and all that long ordeal into so much love. For 14 long years, my sister walked a very high road, and along the way discovered that God was with her, that and as they felt his presence, it gave them hope, it gave them courage. He was working on a better plan than they would have made for themselves. He was growing them, he was maturing them, he was making them more the people he created to be. So if you're having a hard time making God your only hope because it seems like he's taking too long, ask Jesus to show you what he's doing in your waiting. Maybe it's skills he's developing or growing your character or maybe changing your heart to align closer to his heart. But whatever it is, when we see what Jesus is doing, waiting doesn't feel hopeless because we see the purpose in it. At the very end of his book, Habakkuk puts it this way. He says, nevertheless, I will wait patiently. Though the fig tree does not bud, and there are no grapes on the vines, though the olive crop fails, and the fields produce no food, Though there are no sheep in the pen and no cattle in the stalls, nevertheless, I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in God my Savior. Hope is the nevertheless of God. Habakkuk uses that word twice. Hope is the nevertheless of God. I've been fired. Nevertheless, I know God will provide. Therefore, I will rejoice. I've lost a loved one. Nevertheless, because of Jesus, I will see them again. Therefore, I will rejoice. My life feels to be falling apart. Nevertheless, I know God will use what the enemy aims at me for his ultimate good. Therefore, I will rejoice. Hope doesn't pretend that life's not hard. Hope just says, but nevertheless, God. So Jesus, thank you that our waiting with you is never pointless or purposeless. You never make us wait for no reason at all. So Lord, I pray for folks in this room right now who maybe they don't feel like they're waiting on you, but they know someone who is. Help them to help that person have confidence. I pray for the people in this room who are waiting for something, and it feels like you're taking a long time, to help them see all the ways you're growing them and developing them and the good things you're doing as they wait. And Lord, I pray for those people who are waiting for something. They're in a very painful situation, and they're waiting for something so good, and it seems like your not yet is a not ever, and they don't understand. Jesus, help them to know that you are good all the time, and that even in a long waiting period, you're always at work. Do for them what you did for my sister. Help them see you in the waiting so that they can have hope and know that their real hope, their only hope, is you, Lord. We pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen.